ends with this thing saying there's been people that believe that the government was experimenting on soldiers in Vietnam with a drug called BZ, right? So I looked into this BZ, and what's funny is in 2008, they declassified this information and it came out they were experimenting on, not necessarily, it's never been proven that it was Vietnam soldiers, but soldiers in the 60s. Like originally this drug was developed as an ulcer drug, but it started giving people hallucinations and they couldn't like perform simple tasks. So the idea was the US government wanted to use it to like drop on the enemy, to keep them, to not kill them, but to keep them from being able to perform tasks and just slow them down and make them non-functional. So they did experiment. It is true. And this movie spells it out perfectly with the name of the drug and everything. And then it was proven 18 years later. But there's also the whole idea, by the way, it was called Agent Buzz, if you want to look into it. But it's just the idea of government cover-ups, government conspiracy, and just all that's gone down. And like looking at when this movie was shot, it's in 1990, which is like as far away from Vietnam as we are from the Second Iraq War.
Right.
And we're still like, that's still pretty recent memory. So in 1990, that was a fairly recent thing. There was still a lot of people our age dealing with what happened to them in Nam. So it's extra relevant in 1990 when it came out.
And what I love is it's one of the layers of the film where all that shit we were talking about existence, about accepting your life or applying significance or letting go of things and moving on and blah, 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 blah. There's this whole other theme in there about the effects of war on people, right? And then the effects exasperated by the government's manipulation of soldiers in war. And in 1990, so this movie would have been prepped and started made and written in the 80s, right? You're like, what, 15 years removed from the end of the Vietnam War or something at this point, right? People were watching footage from Vietnam on the news, right? And it was the first time that they were experiencing visual imagery of some of the experience. And then we know our government does shit like this. Tuskegee, straight up, they experiment on the vulnerable and willing sometimes in our society. And it's a true thing. And it's a real thing. And the more that we get removed from an object or a significant point in history of our culture, the more we can like kind of dissect it and really look at it objectively. And the Vietnam War is still something that I don't think America has dealt with. We're still holding on to it, like the loss of a son, right? Like the loss of cute ass Macaulay, goofy ass Culkin showing up.
In that time as well, the soldiers had low morale. And they already felt defeated, and they already felt like their government betrayed them in a lot of ways.
I love that. Like in the movie, they show that in the very short time that they have, you can tell in those like 30 seconds what this troop has went through. Yeah,
right. They feel betrayed. So it made sense to me that when he's dying and he's also infected with this disease, that somehow his psyche would manifest that, you know, the government did this to me. Which in another is another way of him trying to hold on to this world, right? Because he's got, it's not that I'm going crazy. Somebody did this to me. And it's like, no, motherfucker, you're dead. Like, you just don't get it. Like, you know what I mean?
But I mean, here's my thing with that, like listening to the writer, and maybe I'm misunderstanding you, but the writer is saying like, no, that is what happened. The government really did do that.
No, yes, for sure. But it's also a clever way of putting that messaging in, like Robbie said, like the writer or the director wanted to put this messaging in this movie, and he used that conduit, that like that in to put it in there, like, you know what I mean? But remember, you said he wouldn't have known, right? But kind of like it would make sense for him to manifest that, given his morale at the time and the drug that's infecting his mind.